Hi, good day to you. I once to does a video about UBI for reals, um, because it's the new dealio with the coronavirus. They're supposedly sending out UBI checks, universal basic income. It's the ching chang yang way to go about things. Um, and I just want to throw my voting into the basket, saying that I'm supportive of the UBI. I'm in support of UBI, of giving money to every and all, even the lazies. Um, at the end of the video, I will explain an alternative way, or a way to get UBI started for those people who are against the idea of UBI because they think that it just makes people lazy, and we live in a capitalist country where you have to, you know, only reward people for trying for the money and all this kind of stuff. But because I do think that's a good way to get the UBI started, is actually with a setup with people who actually have to work for it. I'll explain it later. It's the whole bike school idea I have explained on my website. But I believe in UBI. And let me explain the results, what can happen with society if you do that, in a way that I'm not so sure other people have explained. So this coronavirus is gonna, it's killing a lot of people. But then in a lot of ways, wasn't it Winston Churchill that said, "Don't let a crisis go to waste"? I think this crisis, if we use it right, and I think in a lot of ways we will use it right, is going to actually improve the country a lot. It's going to help us put sanctions on China to get them to get rid of those wet markets and those other countries out there. It'll help us figure out how to shut down the airlines whenever the Chinamen get their coronaviruses up again, and it'll help us, get healthcare, single payer healthcare out of the way, or started, so that we don't have to worry about people using their life savings just because they spend a night in the ICU with a ventilator. But also, it'll help people into the idea of universal basic income. And I think one thing about this coronavirus is it's helping drive home, and it's obvious already, but it's helping drive home to the general masses that the other part of the problem with the coronavirus, other than grandmama, people dying, is that it's hurting the economy. So why is it hurting the economy? Because people don't get to go to work anymore. So people are talking about how they're bummed that they're closing the schools down, not because the kids aren't going to stop learning, but because there's no more jobs for teachers and no more people to babysit kids. So that's basically everybody, and that's basically what most people are saying. I haven't heard anybody say, "Oh no, now my kid, when he's 25, he's gonna know 1 year less worth of history and common sense." No, people are bitching and moaning that there's no jobs for the teachers and a place to dump the kids. That's what the problem is. So all we have to do is switch the system around so that the parents educate and take care of their own kids, so they don't have to, and with all the same money, so they don't have to go and get some job, and also so that teachers don't have to. You don't have to have that useless teacher job, and people can have useful jobs. It's all about the jobs. And so if we just streamline the economy, and give people money, that's really all we need. And then you can just trust people to educate themselves. So I want to talk about the effects of what a UBI would have, though, like how the world would change. I think I'm in a unique position to talk about this. Look at my face; it's like half white and half flesh colored because of the sun. I'm in a unique position, and I have to be super careful about how I say this because my two brothers and my mother are adamantly opposed to me saying anything because they're super private. But the fact of the matter is that I guess due to land investments, I do get a passive income that does not come from my website. So it's a type of a passive income that you could call a gift from God, um, gift from my grandfather to be exact, who's dead. So that's why I get the money now. And it's just about enough money to survive. It wasn't enough money to survive. I had to have a supplemental job or supplemental jobs. And luckily for me, I never actually wasted time trying to get my own business going because now I don't have to have a business, at least for now. I can focus all my time on my website, the best website that has ever been created, kylepounds.com. Makes me the greatest mind who ever lived on the planet Earth. More magnificent than Plato or Socrates or Newton or Einstein. All those guys are morons compared to me. Just look at my website. Look at my timeline. But so I'm one of these people who you could call a harbinger of the future. Okay, I remember Joe Rogan. I was watching a Joe Rogan with somebody, and Joe Rogan's bitching and moaning about rich kids, and which I'm not. I mean, I didn't have enough money to survive until last year, and now I just have enough money to survive. Okay, should I say how much money I get? Is that allowed? God, I wish I could say how much money I get. It's not that much. I made a mistake a couple of months ago. I thought it was more than it was, but it's not that much. It's about enough to. It's about enough to live off of, fruits and vegetables and mind my own business in my house. But I don't have to work, and that's the kind of UBI that people are talking about. Just give people enough to live, and so that they can hang out in their rooms and eat vegetables, but they don't have to work. And I remember Joe Rogan talking about that, like, oh, these motherfucking kids who don't have to work, they become useless, idiot losers. And Joe Rogan's got this, even though he's smart, he's got this bully mentality because he hangs out with a bunch of primitive UFC guys. It's like easy to beat up on them and bully them, and they're just pushovers and they're just idiots. And what you have to do is people have to fight for what they have if they're going to have a character. And I don't think that's true. I mean, that's only true if you're the kind of person who surrounds yourself with jealous people. Because I know people hate my guts just for being perceived as being richer than I am. I managed to travel around Asia, South America, for like a couple of years studying Spanish, but I was living really frugally, more frugally than other people. Like I traveled around around South America to learn Spain, not to climb mountains and bike and stuff. All I did was study. So I wasn't spending any money, but I went to Argentina and taught English for a couple of months, and then they didn't pay me at all, not get a single penny. I think because they're pissed off at me because for being like supposedly rich. And then I went to Chile and nobody hired me. And then they were just full blown like insulting me and telling me, not even giving me a chance, telling me I was an idiot and all this stuff, basically lying about my credentials. And then I got this roommate who decided he hated my guts because he thought I was richer than I was. So, people will hate your guts and go after you. So if you're going to be one of these like people who's perceived as being rich kid or whatever, it doesn't work, then you're not going to have any friends. But because everybody's going to be jealous of you. But that's not what I'm. That's not going to be an issue if everybody gets the same amount. Giving out a universal income is going to create a society of equality, and it's going to change the way people think. That's the thing that people don't talk about. It's actually going to change the way we all think in society, and it's going to equalize everything, and it's going to, heal jealousies between the people jealous of people who they perceive as being more fortunate than them, and it's also going to cure the snooty, cooler than thou attitude that rich people have towards poor people. Because I kind of seen it from both angles. I just explained the angle that how people hate your guts because they think that you're rich. But it's the same thing. People who are richer than you hate your guts because they think they're better than you. And I've experienced it from both ends. And I remember when I was a kid, my dad was in real estate. That's how he made his money when I was a kid. But he didn't. He pretty much didn't work. He was a house flipper, but he pretty much didn't work. And so I remember, I grew up in a nice house in Austin, Texas. Governor Ann Richards daughter was my babysitter, and Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother was my next door neighbor, and we lived up on the top of the hill in Westlake Hills and had a pool in the backyard, and we had a forest for our backyard, and so I kind of had and plus my dad never worked and my mom wasn't working either, so I kind of saw myself as one of these fortunate ones since I was a little kid. And so I remember, and then when we moved to Boulder, we had a nice big house at the beginning before we ran out of money. In 1980, we suddenly lost all the money because my dad lost his two office buildings in Austin because there was an oil crash. But we had a nice big house with a river in our backyard in Boulder, and a 7,000 square foot house. But I remember the attitude that I had was like, and I never actually had the attitude, but I could detect the thought that you could have, and I know that's the thought that these little rich bastards have. I lived in Chile for 5 years teaching English, and I had this little student for one day teaching English. This little 10-year-old girl, who was the daughter of these two lawyers who lived up in Locuro in the very top house, like these rich people. And people in third world countries, rich people in third world countries are pieces of shit. And this little girl, I couldn't believe it, was talking to me like I was an idiot, like because they probably thought I was an idiot because I was a teacher. And see, that's what happens when people are rich. And I've detected it myself. And also her mother one day was screaming and yelling at these workers for like 10 minutes while I was trying to give an English class to her son for whatever reason, but just being completely out of line, like screaming at the top of her lungs like a banshee for like 30 minutes at these guys. I couldn't believe they were still there. But I remember the attitude I had when I was a kid. It was like, how is it that my father doesn't have to work and we don't have to work and there's all these other people that work? Like, they must be stupid for letting us get away with this. And so that was me not even being that wealthy. And I remember, and so that must be the attitude that these rich assholes have, like people whose parents are like lawyers and make tons of money. They probably look around at everybody else who are like baggers at the supermarket or whatever, and they're like, oh, you must be a total idiot for letting us get away with robbing you like this. And I remember there was or you must be an idiot for not putting yourself in the situation that we are. And I remember there was oh shit, my battery's about to die. I gotta plug this up real quick. I remember there was something that some rich dude said, super wealthy. It was this guy was doing like a TED talk. Was it the guy who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad or something? One of these billionaires, and they're talking to their billionaire, and they're like, yeah, if these people realized how much money we actually have and how much power and money we actually have, there would be a revolution in America. And so anyways, when you have these bratty kids of these rich people, I think they grow up like that, and they look around and they actually resent and despise and have hatred for regular people just because they're richer than them. And it's really bad in third world countries. I lived in Chile teaching English for 5 years, and a lot of my students were rich people. And rich people in Chile are just rude assholes, especially the younger ones who don't work. Especially women who don't work, younger women, and because they think that they've got the Adonis blood with tiger DNA or whatever, tiger blood and Adonis DNA, just because like their daddy has a high-paying job, and so they get to shit and piss all over everybody. And if you want to even magnify it even more, just look in the past with the Roman Empire. Remember that movie, Django Unchained, when the lady, she perceived as the slave as accidentally looking at her husband for like 1 second too long, so she thought she was fucking her husband. So she threw this like huge glass jar at the lady's face and busted her head open. Well, in like Roman Empire, they would people would have life and death power over their slaves, and rape, sexually abuse and rape their slaves. In fact, that happened in America with the slavery. They would sexually abuse their slaves. When they had at the end of the Civil War, they went in and they started interviewing people. The Northerners started interviewing these Southern Southern ex-slaves and figuring out what the whole slave owning society was all about in those days. And they would rape their slaves on a regular basis. The men would rape the women slaves. That's why there's so many like mixed races people down there now, and it would even go both ways. They did a study, and that was 31 pages long, just of stories of raping slaves. And the last 5 pages of that was actually women raping males. There were girls who would rape, usually younger girls who would rape, force the young black men to have sex with them, or else they'd kill them. And in an ancient Rome, they would rape their slaves, and they would make their slaves just treat them like animals. And luckily, we're a lot more civilized now, but we can make it even less classist, with the different classes hating each other. If you were to do the UBI, the UBI wouldn't just allow people to educate themselves and to have a quality of life, but it also would completely redesign society and make society like an equalized society where everybody can go to the same school. I remember when I was a kid and going to public school, everybody, like the rich people and the poor people, would all be in the same class, and they'd all be dressing the same. And that was like the American dream. And since then it's gotten worse. There's more private schools, and there's less money to put into the public schools, and but we can get back to that. I guess the '60s of America, where you wouldn't have to. You could be a milkman and have a two-car garage. And so, what I want to talk about, yeah, is the psychological benefits of in society if we had a UBI. So as I'm a kind of a harbinger, because I get about as much money. Now I'm giving away how much money I get. I get about as much money as Andrew Yang was proposing, something around that, just about enough to survive. And but that's all you need, because what happens if you get a UBI is somebody like me. You're going to get somebody who doesn't care about money. And that's what you want. You want a society where nobody cares about money. Because when nobody cares about money, all people are going to care about is how they can serve the world the most. That's what's going to happen. You're not going to get what these right wingers think, where everybody's gonna just like watch video games. I mean, people just sit around on our asses and watch video games anyway. So like, what are you talking about? We can't get any worse than it already is. And besides, the people who are the laziest and need the most people wiping their asses are the rich people. That's why they have servants here and servants there and assistants here and assistants there. They don't need that. People should. One of the reasons the Roman Empire crashed was because they never illegalized slavery, which would have given people an incentive to invent railroads and steam engines, and that would have led to an industrial revolution, second, third, fourth, and then we'd be up in the fourth industrial revolution by 500 AD instead of 2000. So giving a UBI is kind of like getting rid of slavery, because slavery is when you have to give up your time. The most precious thing somebody has in time. We only have a certain amount of time to live in life. And if you're just going to make somebody just stand there and do something a robot can do, then you're just enslaving somebody. You're making them your slave. It's the same thing as slavery, is when is this minimum wage that doesn't pay you enough money to survive. And so if you give up people a UBI and make it so that they don't have to work, boom, there goes slavery. It's basically the same level of improvement in society. And so what you're going to get is people like me. Okay. I probably have a little bit, more creativity and work ethic than your average person, but that's definitely what's going to happen. That's just the natural quality of all people. If people don't care about money, they're going to find something to do for society, and they're going to get super creative and do all sorts of community related service for society. Because even if it's for selfish purposes. People like to start up community stuff so that they can get pat on the back and have more people like them and be more popular and all that kind of stuff. That's the reward that people get instead of money. So when you don't care about money, and I don't care about money because I have enough to survive, and I don't have this desire to spend more money because I already have my thing going on. So basically, I get enough money to just lay in my room and work. And so what do I do with the money? I mean, I could go out, I could be running and biking and swimming all day long and outside or whatever. But what I choose to do is just hang out in my room, and it's kind of to my physical detriment. I just hang out all day long because I don't ever exercise, except recently I started running with my mom. But I just hang out all day long and I work on my website, kylepounds.com, with my timeline I'm working on actually right now. It's just a general education website, just filling in the gaps of all the stuff that needs to be that isn't useful but should be. Like there are no actually that many useful places where you can read a book on the online, and my book design online is much better than anybody else's in the world. So that'll just keep going. I'll just keep doing this, keep working on my website, because then the motivation that keeps me going is because I know that it's good for the world. And so that's the kind of people you're going to get. If you get the UBI, you're going to get more and more people like me. And so imagine if there were, 300 million people like me in the world who could do whatever they want. They don't care about money. They would imagine all the amazing things people would think of that I can't even think of, because people's brains work in different ways. And so somebody could invent, I mean, who knows? There's all sorts of people thinking, so they could have all different inventions. Somebody could invent a new this, a new that, a new next thing, and then we would just create even more and more wealth so that you could give more UBI to people, and there's more robots to design to do stuff for us. And so that's what's going to happen. And so you need a life where people don't care about money, because the problem is when you have a world where it's either low minimum wage, where you have to work 40 hours a week just to be able to pay your rent, but you don't have any extra money after that to like drive a car or anything. You're a slave. You just work all the time. And then the other extreme are people who have enough money to have 7 houses in a bunch of different countries, and then when they're not in their houses, they're just sitting there, and then they have like their worker bees maintaining their houses for them. They have like an army of maintainers maintaining all their personal stuff, like their mechanic working on their Lamborghini, and then their gardener and their masseur and and they're basically like their slaves, because all those people are working for like not enough, or a lot of those people, like if you get your gardener or whatever, Mexican gardener, or people working in their companies getting for minimum wage, making them all that much money. What that does is it warps people's brains more than anything, because now all people care about is money. And so like somebody like me could be making nothing, and I could be like, hey, let me tell you about my wonderful site. And they'd be like, oh, but how much money do you make on it? Oh, I don't make any money. Oh, and then they're like, oh, well, then it must not be worth anything, or let me tell you about my site. Well, how much money do you make? Oh, I don't know. Oh, well, then, you're not good enough to talk to me. And it's even worse in South America, like in Chile. Like you can't, like they refuse to talk to you if you're rich. I remember one example. I was talking to my ex-wife's friend, and she's like, oh yeah, there's this person who's into aromatherapy, because I was talking about aromatherapy, who's like her boss or something. And she's like, oh, but she's like a rich person, so you can't actually talk to her. It was like she was talking it like it was just common knowledge. Like, oh yeah, they don't talk to you. And and that another reason for that is because they're afraid that you might want to leech on them and then suck all your money, like that movie Parasite. I didn't see it, but and I've actually dealt with that same problem too. There was this kid who I worked washing dishes with in Durango, and then he got kicked out of his house for burglarizing his own house, like stealing money, stuff from the house he was renting. So I let him move into my house with me and my friends, and then he ended up robbing us before he leaving. He stole like $1,000 worth of Buddha statue from me, and $900 of artwork from my other roommate, and stole stuff from everybody, because he was like a dirtbag who's had this poverty mentality. So if you can give people $1,000 a month, then that's gonna evaporate that whole "I'm better than you" attitude. So I'm not going to talk to you because you must be a total idiot for having a minimum wage job. And it's not true. I mean, people get stuck in certain situations, even if they're high quality people. Like they don't they don't they had to take care of their parents growing up. They didn't get any advantages, or they live in a town that doesn't have any opportunities for them. But most importantly, the people who are minimum wage people and are just regular people, they don't care about money. I mean, it's they don't they their values don't align with this ultra wealthy, because they actually are good people, and they just want to share. They don't want to take from everybody. They just want to take what they need, and that's it. So most people, I would actually say that most people who are just minimum wage workers would actually do a better job if you were to reverse the jobs, and you were to make all of the poor people CEOs, and make all the CEOs bag groceries and work as a clerk somewhere. The world would actually, I think, function even better. I don't think CEOs are smarter. They're just greedier. And I mean, it's a kind of complicated. I mean, for a large part, it's like that. People, it's common knowledge that the best doctors in the world are the doctors in Cuba, because they don't get paid any more than anybody else. And so for a fact that somebody became a doctor because they actually want to help somebody. But in America, a lot of doctors are assholes, especially the ones who get even more, because they don't even care about you. I went to the emergency room once because I cut my leg and it wasn't stop bleeding. And the emergency room doctor he was getting what, $300,000 a year. He's a total asshole. He's like, what? He was just, I could tell. I mean, he couldn't hide the rich assholeness of himself, and and so when people don't care about money, what that's going to do is it'll just level the playing field, and nobody's gonna think they're better than anybody else, and also nobody's gonna be pissed off at somebody else thinking that they have it like better than you, and that they hate you. So it's gonna allow people to communicate with each other and not have all of this strife. I think that's where all the strife comes from, is when somebody decides that they don't like somebody who they don't know just because they're not like you. And it's kind of like the ultimate communism. I think the most communist society that ever existed was Sparta. People like to call Sparta, like a military camp, and it was. But first and foremost, even more than that, it was a communist state. It was a state where everybody was equal. They made it so that money had to be in these big iron bars, so that if you wanted to buy something fancy, you had to cart it out in a huge cart, and everybody would see you with all those iron bars. And they even had regulations that you weren't allowed to put decorations on your house, and you could only wear one piece of clothing that had to do you all year round. And it was like forced. That's why the word Spartan comes from. When you have nothing, you have an absolute minimum. But that ended up making one of the most powerful and most prideful and famous city states in all of Rome. Was the most communist one. And that's why communism failed in Russia, because they were already ingrained in this two-tier system, with the rich, ultra powerful, and then the poor. And so they try to do like that, switch it over to communists, and then they just revert back to the communist people, the bosses of the Communist Party, having all the power and all the wealth. The richest person in the world is Putin, but that's the country that was a communist. How did that happen? So anyway, getting sidetracked. But so but the thing is, all it takes is $1,000. All it takes is enough money to survive, and then because then that'll allow people to work for their own, and so instead of, work for what they want to do to help the world, and so in that world, when you've got a bunch of Kyle Pounces running around just working on this and that, then you're going to have some super rich person, and it'll be the conversation is going to be more centered around the quality and the actual individuality of the person, instead of people being preemptively shut off to each other. There's a point that I'm trying to get to, but I'm not doing a very good job. Um, 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 it's gonna, yeah, it's like a subconscious effect, and then so people are gonna, there is naturally a, cream rising to the top, and there's people are different. Some people are smarter, some people are not as smart. So then the natural stratification is just going to be on who the people are who are working the hardest, who are the people who are the most creative and the smartest, and but those people who are actually generally smart and hardworking and creative aren't going to be like, stupid and disrespectful. They're going to be a lot more open and respectful to other people, and the people who don't have to work aren't going to be feeling like they have such a pedestal to stand on, because other people actually have an actual humanity, an actual person there that you can deal with. Like if you're a person who just has to work your whole life, you're never going to be able to develop any accomplishments in your life that you can use to prove to other people that you're actually a person. You know, because you're never going to have any time. You're going to be way too exhausted at the end of the work. You're just going to want to relax and rewind by watching a sitcom before you pass out, so you can get rest to go and do another day's work to make your boss rich. So, and I remember, I don't think the super rich people really understand that. I was watching this video. This guy Tom Ballou, he's a billionaire who started a new YouTube channel where he interviews other rich people, and he said, and he thinks he's really progressive, but he said something like, "Well, there have to be rich people and poor people because that's how it is," and it's not true. There doesn't have to be rich people and poor people. There has to be smart people and lazy people, but there doesn't have to, because of the variety of humanity. But it doesn't have to be rich and poor. You can give, and if you give just a minimal amount of money. See, the thing is, if you give a minimal amount of money to somebody, then they have all the time in the world to create something that could make them more money. Like me, I have all the time in the world to build something that will eventually make me enough money to buy a mountain bike, but it will award me enough time to create an online persona, to actually have like a personal brand, an actual individual person, and in a way that no rich person can just buy that. You could have a rich person buy Instagram or YouTube followers or YouTube subscribers and stuff like that, and buy pay marketers to market you or whatever and get you suddenly famous. But you can't just buy somebody to write a book for you and say that you wrote the book. Everybody's going to know that it's ghost written. You can't pay somebody to inject this knowledge of Spanish speaking into your mind. You have to study it yourself. If you want to be physically fit, you can't pay somebody to just inject physical fitness juice into you. You have to actually work for the physical fitness. That's the way God created people. God created us all equal. And so if God created us all equal, why are we trying to make falsely, make other people, make everybody different? It's not the natural way. Natural way doesn't make us all